Two important .NET Core files, program class and startup class. In today's world, all of us are so busy with writing and API endpoints, writing services that we forgot how actually .NET Core works, from where it starts. So today's video we will talk about two important things, program class and startup class. We will talk all the little details, how it works and what's the key role of program and startup class in .NET Core. Okay, so let's start.
So here we are in Visual Studio. Now this is the fun time. So what I have done, I have created one .NET Core application and I have choose .NET Core template. So when you choose this template, .NET Core template, you would see some files like these. These are the default files that Microsoft provide in their .NET Core template. So here we go. We have program class and we have startup class. So where we are going to focus today. So why we need this program class in .NET Core and how this is important. If you notice, in your console application, you have similar program class file which help to execute your console application. So technically, .NET Core is also a console application. That is why you have this program class. And why this is important? Because this class helps you to host your application on the server. It has all those information, where this application is hosted. And this guy decide where it will go and it will host. You can customize this as well, but the default server would be Kestrel server, where .NET Core application host, right? And this would be the entry point of your .NET Core application. When you hit the run button or when you launch the application for the first time, it will come here. So let me show you. I have put my breakpoint over this method over here. Let me put some more breakpoints. Yeah, breakpoints are already there. So that will help us to identify what is the first entry point. It is a startup class, program class, or what, right? So let me hit it and let's see the magic. Okay, it started, and you see this is the first class, program class, where it comes, right? And now here you go. So it will build your application on the required server, required host, and it will launch your application. Okay, so let's stop it. And if you see line number 23, which says what should be the startup class. I mean, this guy says I can only host your application, I can take care of your hosting server, hosting application, and I will also redirect to your somewhere further. All the responsibility will fall to that class. That's what this class says, right? So what it will do, it will hand over all of the further functionality to this class. So this says use startup. You can register any startup class. So it doesn't necessarily that the name should be startup, it could be any name. But since Microsoft provides some naming convention, that is startup, that is why we are using this startup. But you can rename this as well. Let's say my startup. I'm going to say my startup. Go to startup and change the class name, and let's see the magic. So see, my startup, right? So it could be any name, but let's follow the best practices and use the default naming convention that Microsoft provide. So let's rename it to rename back to startup. Okay, perfect. So what will happen, after this program, your request will go to this startup. So startup is similar to global.asax. Actually, startup class has replaced global.asax in .NET Framework. We had global.asax class in .NET Framework, but in .NET Core, we have startup class, right? As name says, startup. So that will help you to start your application, right? Program helps you to launch your application, host your application. Startup class help you to start your application, right? So what does that mean? It has two important methods, ConfigureService and configure. So that is something people always get confused how it works, why we have these two methods. So what happened? ConfigureService. So you will see the comments here as well. So it says use this method to add service to the container. So that container is something like a default memory, the server memory, the .NET Core application memory. So what it will do, whenever you create any service, custom service like domain service, business service, whatever service that you create, you have to register over here to resolve the dependency injection, right? So that is why we have this class, this method. This method will help you to register the middlewares, right? So we will talk in detail, but let's focus over the configure service, and I will show you how we can create a service, how we register, and what are the impacts. So let's start. Let's create one service. What we will do, we will say add class service, let's say service 1, and let's create one interface as well, so we can follow the D principle of solid. So let's say new item and say iService. Let's add just one method and say this is interface. We will say return type string, and let's return the service. I would say get service name. Okay, let's this is class, let's make it interface. Okay, so let's implement, save it and implement this. Now we have to implement. Come on. Okay, now we have implemented and we have this. Now what we have to say, let's return something. Since the return type is string, I would say this is service 1. Perfect. Okay, so now we have to go to our controller, which is default controller Microsoft has provided us, weather forecast controller, and let's initialize everything, so we can call this method through one of the endpoint. So what I have to do, I have to say private read only, and then I have to use this iService interface, and I will name it something. I will declare over here. Okay, so this is going to be object, let's say, but it won't be happy over here because I have to pass in the constructor. So let's pass the second argument and name it something else. So here I will pass everything to this underscore service. And now let's create other endpoint. I would say get service, and I would only return string here. And what I have to do, I have to call my service. So let's return service dot get service name. So this is how we normally call our services and all. What happened to this guy? This is already has a get method. Okay, no worries, don't be sad. Okay, so this is happy now. So what happened normally, you register over here, you declare over here, you pass all the things to your object, that interface object, and then you try to call your service, and this is how it works, right? But will it work over here? Are we missing something? Let's figure out. Let's just hit the run button. Let's see what happened. Okay, so this is my startup class, and let's register over here, put a breakpoint so I can show you. Okay, so let's see what happened. So here it tries to register here. So remember one thing, startup class and program class, if you are in a debug mode or whatever mode, you can only see it execute only one time, just one time, right? And I can show you right now. Let me just hit it. Okay, so it has configured the service, whatever service it required for this application. Now it is configuring all the middlewares, right? So these are the default middlewares. We will talk a little later. So let's hit it. So you see error, and why it says something related to dependency injection. Seems like dependency injection is not resolved for get service. So here we go. That is why we have configure service, right? And what we are missing here, that we have not registered our service, and that is why it says dependency injection error. So we need to, in this situation, you need to come here in configure service and you can say, hey, register my service. You would say any, it's all up to you how you want to register. Since I would say add scoped, and we will cover add singleton, add scope, add transient, all in incoming videos. So let's focus over registering it. My service is iService and my service is service1. Okay, so this is I have registered. Now let's see what happened. Let's see, will it work? Okay, cool. It came to register here. Let's see. Okay, middlewares, let's see. It works now. You see the magic, but this is not our endpoint. So our endpoint was get service. See, so it is returning this is service1. So this is the magic of configure service that will help you to resolve the dependency, that will help you to register all of your service here, all of your service dependencies here, right? So I hope now you understand. I hope it is clear now. So whenever we are working on any application, we will know where we have to register our services and what this method does. Right. So if you remember, like few minutes back, I told you that this startup class and program class runs only once when your application starts. After that, it won't work, it won't run, right? This class. So if you want to see, I will put a breakpoint here, and let's see what happened. Let me refresh this. See, no. But if you go to controller, it is coming to controller actually. Let me put a breakpoint here. Refresh. See, the breakpoint hit this point, the controller, not startup, not program. Why? Because this will only executed once your application launched, and it registers everything in the memory. So it knows, hey, I have hosted my application. This program class knows that hosted the application. Startup will register everything in memory, and then from that memory it will keep pulling what you need, what service you need, what sort of registration you have done. So all those information that get from that container, that memory. Okay, so with that we are done with our service configure service method. Now let's jump to configure. So configure helps you to register middleware. What are middlewares? So middlewares are like this any HTTP request that will come to your server, it will go from here. Every API endpoint that you make a request to server, first it will come here, it will make a check. It is like security guard of your application. Like you enter into one mall or a shop, there is a security guard on the gate, and it will check all your pockets. You have any weapon or any sort of things, and then it will let you go in. So that is something configure does. So what it will do, it will make all the checks. Every request that comes to this to the server, it will modify that request, and when it is sending back to the client, it will modify the response as well, right? So for those things we have this configure. So some of these are the default middleware. So what it says, HTTP redirection, use routing, because some of the things, if it is not there, even your application won't work. But like use authorization, your application work without authorization. If I comment this and say hit, let's see what happened. So your application should start running without any exception. Let me just stop all the breakpoint. So see, your application is working, but it can't work without routing, right? So some of the required middlewares that is required for .NET Core application, right? So see, your application just crashed because it says I need a routing, otherwise I don't know where I need to go, which route I need to go. So that is why some default middlewares are important for you. Okay, so let's try to understand what we will do. We will create one custom middleware over here, very small middleware to understand. And what we will do, we will modify the request when it comes to here, and we will also modify the response when we are sending back the response to client. So to save some time, I have syntax already ready with me, so let me just paste it over here. Over here. Okay, so you see what we are trying to do. Whenever any API request comes to this application, to your application, what we are going to do, we are making changes in the response headers. We are adding one additional header before sending to a client. So let's say request test, let's say just 0 1 2 3 4 5 6, right? So I'm adding middleware response into the over here into the headers, right? And this next means, if you don't say next, it will only stop here. If you want to register more middleware, you have to say return next, so it can jump to this. Okay, so let me show you first. Let me just control KC so we can command, and let's see what happened now, how it works, this configure middleware. Let me inspect, go to network, refresh, and let's see. So what I'm expecting, what I was doing, that I'm injecting this header in the response header. This should be the key, this should be the value. Let's see where it is. Just a response header, and here we go, X middleware response, and the value is 026, right? So any endpoint, API endpoint. Now let me create other endpoint. Let me do quickly copy paste to save some time, and what I will do, I will say, the better way, what we can do, let's delete it. And we already have one controller, right? Yeah, here we go, we have already one controller. Let me hit that API endpoint even. So get service. Okay, let me keep this inspect element, and let's paste it. Let's see. Okay, so this is service 1, and you would see the response. See, everything, we are making that response injection. So this is what middleware does. So what you can do, any middleware that you want to do, create, maybe you want to perform the authorization, right, authentication, that every request, every API endpoint should be secure. So what you can do, you can create some sort of class or service or method for checking that security thing, and you need to register that middleware over here. So middleware is something, HTTP handler in .NET framework. In .NET Core we have middlewares, so this thing you can do. Let me show you one more interesting thing. So let's uncomment this code, and what it does. So what will happen, any you try to make any API endpoint request, every endpoint will return the same thing. This is what we are doing. We are tweaking the response. Whatever response that API endpoints are returning, if you go to controller, this API endpoint is returning this service implementation. This API endpoint is returning that weather control information, right? But before going back to client, what we are doing, we are tweaking those response. See, I am tweaking this response. So let's see what happened now. IS Express, see hello world, though I am calling that weather forecast, right? So anything that you call, but it will still say hello world. Why? Because I have changed that complete response from here. So that is what configure is. So configure keep a check on every HTTP request pipeline. What request it is coming, what request it is sending back. So all of those things are being controlled from here. So whatever you need to do, if you want to perform authorization or maybe some additional check on your request response, you can write that logic over here. I hope you enjoyed and we have learned something very interesting. So that's all for today's video. I will see you in the next video.